Trump has suggested he could eventually withdraw ICE agents from Minneapolis, but last night on Truth Social, Trump called on Congress to pass legislation to end sanctuary jurisdiction policies, claiming that Democrat run cities and states are refusing to cooperate with ICE. What do we know so far?
Well, it's the case of you take one tiny step back while you maintain your charge forward into this, what is now a full out assault. It's an assault against residents of particular areas, especially Minnesota. It's an assault on the US legal system. It's an assault on American communities. It's an assault on the American system. So I guess I need to explain that. Take the initial, maybe we'll have a review of what happened and maybe they'll withdraw. There are a handful of Republicans. Now, it's not an overwhelming move of Republicans, but there are a handful of Republicans in Congress who are saying, look, we need to have an investigation here. We need to consider the legal guidelines under which ICE is operating. And then you've even had one who said maybe we need to redeploy ICE and we need to send them elsewhere. And Donald Trump, for all his crazed approach to life as well as politics, he and his team are looking at this and going, "Wait a minute, have we possibly overstepped here?" But I think you're really good to put this into a wider context, and that is not just Trump. You talk about officials like Stephen Miller, the key advisor on this. You talk about J.D. Vance, who was pushing lines this weekend about how the problem here is people are not cooperating with law enforcement. If you talk about the head of Border Patrol, Jeffrey Bovino, who yesterday was saying that his agents were the victims here, not Alex Preddy, these guys are doubling down, and women. Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Secretary, they are doubling down on having an unlimited authority to go into anywhere, whether it be with these shock troops, whether it be with the threat of financial punishment, whether it be with the attempt, as they have done in Minnesota, the threat of prosecution of Governor Walz, of Mayor Frey of Minneapolis. The wider point around this ICE deployment and Border Patrol deployment, and Minneapolis is just the latest. They've been in California. They've been operating in places like down in Tennessee, down the south. They're operating throughout the United States. The wider point here is that you can deploy your people with no legal authority. They don't need warrants. They don't need probable cause. And that if they ever do commit acts of violence, there's no legal accountability.
What did you make of Trump? For example, he was saying that his team was reviewing everything, and he didn't answer whether when asked about if the officer who'd shot Pretty had done the right thing, he didn't give an answer to that, which sort of goes into contrast to what we've had from like Kirstie Noem, for example, the Homeland Security Secretary. She was sort of going out on the line that Pretty had acted violently and attacked officers, although video footage doesn't seem to corroborate with the things that she's saying. So what did you make of that approach by Trump there?
I mean, remember, it wasn't just Kristi Noem who said that Alex Pretty was threatening officers and brandishing a gun. It was Donald Trump who initially said it. It was other officials who came out, but the videos undercut everything they said. And because we haven't had a proper investigation, we're having to rely on the multiple videos that came out. We're having to rely on the witness statements. And by the time you got to yesterday morning, even the most hardline Trumpist who were coming out and demeaning Pretty, demeaning the protesters, they couldn't go as far as to say that Pretty was brandishing a firearm because it was quite blatantly not true. I mean, he had a phone in one hand, his other hand was empty as he got wrestled to the ground, and the firearm that was taken from his waistband, he had a legal permit to carry it. And seconds after they took the firearm from him, which he had never touched, they executed it. So you can't say, so at that point, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. They had gotten away with this thing. You've heard this phrase, but just to repeat from Orwell, the final command of the state was, don't believe what your eyes see, don't believe what you hear with your ears. And all of a sudden, the videos were kind of kicking back against their attempt to suspend reality or to distort it. But again, I think you got to take this with caution in terms of that. Even if Trump has now said that we're going to review everything, the fundamentals are is that the FBI, federal authorities are refusing to hand over any information to state and local authorities. So they're refusing to hand over any information. whether you get more pressure from Congress, especially Republicans, to say, okay, we have to have a vaccine, that's what we've got to watch for this week. But if you do not get that pressure from Republicans in Congress, have no doubt about it, the Trump people will just keep going the way they're going, and they have to. The thing about an authoritarian regime is that if it ever has to retreat on exercising that unlimited authority, then it's shown that it can be checked. Then it's shown that others do have a role in the system. And therefore, the idea is keep pushing here, keep pushing harder.
But I guess on the other hand, what we can base our evidence on is these video clips are available, and from what it's suggesting at the moment, it sort of counters those claims that Preti was brandishing a weapon, as was previously mentioned. But also, this what's happened with Preti, it sort of highlights another issue here, which is with American gun laws, isn't it? Because, for example, we had Kash Patel saying that you can't bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. But, Preti was legally allowed to bring this gun to the protest, wasn't he?
First of all, let's again go with facts. We know that he had a gun because we saw a gun that was taken from his waistband. We do not know he had multiple magazines. That is an assertion by the Trump people. And as the Minneapolis police chief, Brian O'Hara, mentioned, they haven't shared evidence of that with Minneapolis police. So he can't say that it's true that there were multiple magazines. But let's put this to the side. What Kash Patel said was wrong. It's factually wrong. And that is, and I don't like it this way. This is why I prefer living in Ireland or in the UK. You can go to a public space in the United States, including a protest, and you can carry a firearm if you have a permit for that firearm and if you have not committed a crime, which would mean you're disqualified. And again, Minneapolis Police Chief O'Hara made it very clear. There was a permit to carry this gun. There's no evidence that Preti had committed any type of crime. It's all legal. So when Kash Patel comes out and says that, you get this interesting reaction which takes place, which is that a few Republican legislators start to say, whoa, wait a minute. Whoa, you're saying you can get killed? You can get killed for legally carrying a gun. And then the National Rifle Association comes out and criticizes, and heaven help us that the National Rifle Association and I wind up on the same side of an issue. I think, hell just froze over. But their point here is that this abuse of authority by the Trump people, that you create a justification for at least violence, if not killing, that no, that's just not something that is allowed by the U.S. system, allowed by the U.S. Constitution. Again, we factor that in. Will that check the Trump people? It might check their language, but will it check what they're actually doing in the days and weeks going forward?